You want to know the moment you truly see a person for what they are. It's not in a crisis. Any fall can rise to an occasion or crumble under pressure. That's just drama. No, the real truth of a person's soul is revealed in the quiet, greedy calm. It's revealed when you dangle a piece of cheese in front of them and then sit back to see just how high they'll jump and for how long before they realize the cheese is a fiction and the hand holding it is made of stone. My name is Anthony Giovanni Luciano, but the world has called me Tony for 78 years. I built a life from sweat and stubbornness, a life that, from the outside, looks like a gleaming, polished thing, a successful construction business, a portfolio of properties that would make a real estate mogul blink, investments that quietly hum along like well-tuned engines. It's the kind of wealth that doesn't just provide, it transforms. It becomes a character in your family story, a ghost at every dinner table, a silent, weighty presence in every conversation. And my family, oh, they were a cast of characters waiting for their final act. My son, Mark, a man whose ambition was always 5 sizes too big for his actual talent. His wife, Cynthia, a woman who polished her social standing like it was the family's silver, which, in a way, it was. My daughter, Sarah, sweet in a fragile way, but married to a vulture in a cheap suit named David, whose eyes were always doing the math, calculating the square footage of my house, the value of my watch, the yield of my bonds. Then there were the grandchildren, Chloe, Mark's daughter, a sharp, pretty thing who inherited her mother's social climbing gear and her father's sense of entitlement, and Ben, Sarah's boy, a quiet, thoughtful young man who always seemed slightly embarrassed by the lot of us. They thought I was just an old man, a comfortable, slightly cantankerous monument to be maintained, like a weathered old statue in the town square. They'd pat my hand, speak a little too loudly, and wait. God, how they waited. I could feel it, the unspoken question hanging in the air every Sunday dinner, every birthday, every holiday. When, and how much? I wasn't sick. I'm fitter than Mark, who gets winded climbing a flight of stairs. But at my age, you're living on borrowed time, and everyone knows it. The politeness became more pronounced, the inquiries about my health more frequent and thinly veiled. David would send me clippings about revolutionary new cardiac procedures. Cynthia bought me a subscription to a meal delivery service for seniors. It was a dance, a slow, tedious waltz towards the grave, and they were all my partners, each trying to lead me in the direction that best suited them. The idea didn't come to me in a flash of anger. It was a slow, cold crystallization. It started at my 78th birthday dinner. They'd gathered at my house, the old Victorian I'd bought and restored with my own hands 50 years ago. The table was groaning with food. No one really ate, because they were all too busy performing concern, performing family, performing love. David was holding court. And the market, Tony. It's just so volatile. A man in your position, you need stability, security. I was just looking at these annuity products. Fantastic returns, guaranteed. But you've got to move fast. I could set up a meeting with my guy. Sarah was nodding along, her eyes flicking to me to see if I was buying it. Mark, not to be outdone, jumped in. Annuities, Dad, that's dinosaur thinking. What you need is a more dynamic strategy. The commercial real estate sector is about to explode. We're talking about getting in on the ground floor of a new mixed-use development. A cornerstone investment from you would secure a legacy position. Chloe, sipping her wine, added, Grandpa, you work so hard. You should be enjoying your life. You know, the Windsor Country Club is accepting a very limited number of new members. Mother and I were saying just the other day, it's exactly the sort of peaceful, dignified environment you deserve. We could put in a word. Even Ben was enlisted. Ben's been accepted to that summer architecture program in Italy, Sarah said, squeezing her son's shoulder. It's a phenomenal opportunity, but the cost is just prohibitive. It's a shame. His portfolio was so strong. Ben looked at his plate, his ears turning red. It's fine, Mom. Really. I sat there, chewing my roast beef, listening to the symphony of their avarice. It wasn't even about me. It was about my money, my things. I was just the inconvenient, aging lockbox that contained them. The love, the care, the attention, it was all a transaction, a down payment on a future inheritance. And in that moment, looking at their eager, avaricious faces, a plan began to form in my mind. It was a terrible, beautiful, vengeful plan. They thought they were playing a game, waiting for me to die, so they could collect their prize. Fine. I would invent a new game, one with rules only I understood. I would give them exactly what they wanted, a competition, and I would sit back and watch them destroy themselves in the process. The seed was planted that night. I watered it 4 weeks, letting it grow in the quiet of my study. It'd make little comments. Hard to know who to trust with all this. It'd muse aloud, gesturing vaguely at the house. Or loyalty. That's the currency that matters in the end, not money. Their eyes would light up, and they'd lean in a little closer. The final piece clicked into place one afternoon when Ben came over. He didn't come often. I think the rest of the family made him uncomfortable. He found me in the workshop, trying to repair a stubborn hinge on an old cabinet my wife, Eleanor, had loved. "Hey, Grandpa," he said, leaning against the doorframe. "Ben, didn't expect to see you. Don't you young people have holograms to watch or something?" He smiled, a real one, not the tight, performative grimace the rest of them offered. "Something like that. Need a hand?" For an hour, we worked in comfortable silence. He didn't try to sell me anything, didn't ask about my will, didn't suggest a better investment strategy for my tool collection. He just handed me tools, held things steady, and listened to me grumble. He was the only one who ever seemed to see me, and not the bank account attached to me. When we finished, he looked at the fixed cabinet and said, "Nona would be happy it's still working." Something cracked open in my chest. Eleanor, God, how I missed her. She'd have seen right through this circus. She'd have been horrified by what our family had become. Ben had her eyes, her quiet decency. That was it. The final piece. He was the one, the only one who wouldn't play the game. I knew it in my bones. I decided to launch my little experiment. I would throw the bait, and I would watch. I called a family meeting. The term alone was enough to send a thrill of anticipation through them. They arrived on time, for once. They sat in my living room, perched on the edges of the furniture Eleanor had picked out, their faces masks of concerned curiosity. I stood before them, leaning on my cane, a prop I sometimes used for effect. I let the silence stretch, looking at each of them in turn. Mark, trying to look like a responsible Arab parent. Cynthia, already mentally redecorating. Sarah, nervous, wringing her hands. David, practically vibrating with financial advice. Chloe, inspecting her nails, but listening intently. And Ben, slouched in an armchair in the corner, looking like he'd rather be anywhere else. "I've been doing a lot of thinking," I began, my voice a low gravel. "About the future. About all of this." I made another vague gesture, this time encompassing the whole room, the house, the invisible empire beyond. It's a lot for one man to manage, and it's got me thinking about legacy, about who's really got my best interests at heart. You could have heard a pin drop. David was leaning so far forward, I thought he might fall off the sofa. "A man gets to my age," I continued, "and he starts to see things clearly. He sees who's there for him, who checks in, who helps. It's the little things that add up. They show character. They show loyalty." I saw the glances then, the quick, sharp looks between Mark and Cynthia, between Sarah and David. The unspoken message. This is it. Hayes making his assessments. "I'm not a fool," I said, and I let a little steel into my voice. "I know what people see when they look at me. I know what they want, and have decided that what I have, it shouldn't just be given. It should be earned." Chloe's head snapped up. "Earned, Grandpa? What do you mean?" I gave her a grandfatherly smile, all warmth and twinkling eyes. "It was my best performance." "Oh, don't look so serious, sweetheart. I just mean that in my final years, I want to be surrounded by those who truly care. Actions speak louder than words, don't they? He'll be watching, he'll be noting. And when the time comes, well, let's just say I believe in incentives. I think it's only right that those who contribute the most to my comfort and happiness in my twilight years should see that reflected in my final arrangements. I didn't say the word will. I didn't have to. It hung in the air, shimmering like a mirage. Mark was the first to break the stunned silence. Dad, that's very wise. Very prudent. Of course. We all want you to be happy and comfortable. You don't even have to ask. Oh, I'm not asking, I said lightly, though my eyes were cold. I'm just telling you how I'm thinking. Consider it an open book, a ledger, and everyone starts with a zero balance. The meeting broke up shortly after. The mood was electric, a bizarre mixture of glee and panic. They tried to play it cool, of course. Hugs, assurances. We love you for you, Dad, Sarah said, a little too forcefully, but as they filed out, I saw it. The calculation, the strategy already forming. They didn't see it as the insult it was. They saw it as a blueprint, a roadmap to the money. All except Ben. He hung back for a moment. He looked at me, and for a second, I saw something in his eyes I couldn't quite identify. Disappointment, pity. He just shook his head slightly and said, "See you around, Grandpa." And then he left. He was the only one who didn't try to kiss my cheek. The game was afoot. The transformation was immediate and grotesque. It was as if it announced a plague of locusts was coming, and I was the only source of food. The onslaught of loyalty began that very evening. My phone rang. It was Cynthia. "Tony, dear. I was just thinking, you shouldn't be cooking for yourself. It's too much trouble. I'm going to organize a meal roster. I'll bring over a lovely cock oven tomorrow, and Mark will come by on Thursday with that lasagna you like." This from a woman who once told me microwave dinners were perfectly adequate for a man living alone. The next morning, a Saturday, my doorbell rang at 8 a.m. There stood David, wearing brand new, suspiciously clean gardening gloves and holding a pair of clippers. "Morning, Tony. Thought he'd get an early start on those hedges for you. Looks like they're getting a bit wild." David, who had never so much as pulled a weed in his life, whose idea of manual labor was signing a check. I stood at my window and watched him hack away at my prize-winning boxwood for an hour, a man engaged in a desperate, clumsy pantomime of usefulness. He left a massacre in his wake, but he was beaming, sweat pouring down his face. "All done. Just looking out for you, Tony. We're family, right? That's what we do." The following week, Chloe started popping by after a yoga class. She'd bring a green juice she swore would add 10 years to my life and insist on decluttering my space. This mostly involved her asking, "Do you really need this, Grandpa?" about various items she deemed unfashionable, which I was certain would later be deemed vintage and valuable once I was gone. She'd rearrange my bookshelves by color and take selfies with me, captioning them "Family First Granddaughter Gores." Mark's approach was more corporate. He started scheduling weekly briefings where he'd come over with his laptop and show me spreadsheets and projections, trying to insert himself as the de facto manager of my affairs. "You need to streamline, Dad. Centralize control. Let me handle the pesky details. You just relax." Sarah's was the most pathetic. She'd come over and just hover. She'd refill my water glass when it was half full. She'd plump cushions I wasn't leaning on. She'd look at me with wide, watery eyes and say things like, "I'm just worrying about you being all alone in this big house." It was a performance of anxiety, a play of concern, and it was utterly exhausting. And through it all, they kept score. It was the most fascinating, hideous part. I'd get a call from Cynthia. "I hope David mentioned I was the one who reminded him about your hedges, Tony. Team effort, really." Click. Mark would drop by. I saw Chloe was here. That's nice, though I'm not sure juice fasts are medically advisable for a man your age. My home-cooked meals are much more balanced. Don't you think? Wink. David would corner me. "Chloe's a sweet girl, but rearranging knickknacks isn't exactly material support, is it? Not like trimming hedges. That's real manual labor. That's value." Nudge. They were rats in a maze, and I was the scientist, watching, taking notes in a little black book I kept in my desk drawer. It was all code. M. Brought lasagna, slightly burnt. Talked for 45 minutes about market share. C. Decluttered the linen closet. Took a silver picture frame she said was tarnished. D. Murdered the boxwood. Left clippings all over the lawn. S. Visited. Cried about a sad movie she saw. Ate my cookies. The ledger was filling up with their desperate, transparent entries. And Ben vanished. His absence was a roaring silence in the midst of all this frantic activity. He didn't call. He didn't visit. I knew because the others reported on it, thinking it was to their advantage. Ben's so busy with his friends, I guess, Sarah would say, trying to sound light, but her eyes were eager, hoping I'd mark him down for negligence. The kid's just not a family man, Tony, David would opine solemnly. Doesn't understand the meaning of responsibility, not like us. His absence was my confirmation. He was the only one who had heard my proclamation for what it was, a deeply cynical, manipulative test, and he wanted no part of it. His silence was the only honest response I got. Weeks turned into months. The loyalty auction, as he'd privately named it, raged on. The efforts became more extravagant, more expensive, more blatant. Cynthia, not to be outdone by David's horticultural terrorism, hired a landscape architect to reimagine my backyard. Without asking, I came home one afternoon to find a team of men ripping out Eleanor's rose bushes. What in God's name is this? I roared. Cynthia materialized, beaming. A surprise. A low-maintenance, drought-resistant Zen garden. So you don't have to lift a finger. I saw red. Those roses. Eleanor had planted everyone. She'd nurtured them for 20 years. I fired the crew on the spot. I told Cynthia to get off my property. She left in tears, confused and angry. She didn't understand. She'd just spent thousands of dollars on my behalf. Surely that was worth major points in the ledger. The incident created a schism. The family began to fracture along faction lines. It was Mark and Cynthia versus Sarah and David. Each couple convinced the other was trying to sabotage their efforts. The Sunday dinners became tense, passive-aggressive affairs. This salt is interesting, Cynthia would say, taking a delicate bite of Sarah's brought-over casserole. Did you use a new recipe? It's the same recipe I've always used, Cynthia. Sarah would reply, her voice tight. Perhaps your palate is just changing. The hedges are growing back in nicely, David, Mark would say. A bit unevenly, but nicely. Well, not all of us can just hire a task to be done, Mark, David would snipe back. Some of us prefer the personal touch. I'd sit at the head of the table, chewing my food, saying little. I was the silent king, and they were the courtiers jostling for favor. They were so busy fighting each other. They'd forgotten I was even a person. I was just the prize. The only thing that united them was their bewilderment and scorn for Ben. His continued refusal to participate was an affront to their entire worldview. I talked to Ben, Sarah said one evening, a note of desperation in her voice. I told him he should come see you. He said he's busy. With a new project. What project? David scoffed. The project of avoiding his family. The boy is lazy, Mark pronounced. No drive. No ambition. It's a shame. They said this to me, hoping he'd agree, hoping he'd finally write him out of the ledger for good. Little did they know, his inaction was the only thing earning him credit in my eyes. The months ground on. The novelty of their efforts began to wear thin, replaced by a grim, determined endurance. The loyalty auction was a marathon, and they were getting tired. The meals became less frequent, the visits shorter. The constant performance was exhausting them. But they couldn't stop. The fear that the others would gain an advantage was too great. I began to feel a strange sense of pity for them. They were trapped in a prison of their own making, of my design. They were so consumed by the ghost of a future fortune that they were missing their actual lives. Mark was neglecting his business. Cynthia's social calendar was in shambles. Sarah was a nervous wreck. David's cheap suits seemed to get cheaper. And then I got sick. It wasn't a play. It wasn't part of the game. It was a genuine, old-fashioned, knock-you-on-your-is case of pneumonia. One day I was fine, the next I was burning up, shivering, my lungs feeling like they were filled with wet cement. I managed to call my doctor, who sent an ambulance. The hospital stay was a blur of beeping machines and sterile smells. When the fog finally lifted, I found myself in a private room, and gathered around my bed, like vultures circling a weakening animal, was my family. Their faces were a perfect mosaic of performative concern and barely concealed excitement. This was it, the main event, the final exam. "Dad, you gave us such a scare," Mark said, gripping my hand a little too tightly. "We've been so worried," Sarah whispered, dabbing at non-existent tears. "The doctors say you'll need round-the-clock care when you're discharged," David said, his voice practically throbbing with opportunity. "We've already discussed it. We're going to take shifts. We're not putting you in some home." This was the ultimate play. This was the grand finale of the loyalty auction. Who would volunteer for the night shift? Who would change my bedpan? Who would prove, once and for all, who was the most loyal? The planning began right there at my bedside. It was a tense, whispered negotiation over my prone body. "I can take weekends," Cynthia said. "My Pilates instructor can come to the house, so he'll be flexible. He'll handle the weekdays after 3, Mark said. "He'll move my meetings. We'll cover the nights," David said, putting an arm around Sarah, who looked pale. "It's no trouble at all." It was settled. The rota was drawn up in David's phone. The competition had entered its most intense, most degrading phase. They were preparing to compete over who could wipe my ass with the most devotion. I was discharged a week later, weak and tired. The doctor prescribed rest, antibiotics, and home care. The family swung into action like a well-rehearsed, if deeply resentful, SWAT team. The first few days were a circus. Cynthia's shifts involved her arranging fresh flowers and complaining about the dust. Mark's involved him talking loudly on his phone about mergers and acquisitions, while I tried to sleep. David and Sarah's night shifts were the stuff of legend. I'd hear them bickering in the kitchen about whose turn it was to check on me. They were miserable. I was miserable. The house, once my sanctuary, had become a stage for the worst play ever written. And then, on the third night home, I heard a key in the lock. It was late, past 11. I assumed it was David and Sarah, early for their shift, but the footsteps that came down the hall were too light, too sure. My bedroom door pushed open. It was Ben. He looked tired. He had a duffel bag slung over his shoulder. He didn't say anything at first, just looked at me lying in the bed, the empty glass of water on the nightstand, the medicine bottles. "Hey, Grandpa," he said softly. "Ben, what are you doing here?" "I heard you were sick," he said, dropping his bag by the door. "I heard about the shifts." He said the word with palpable distaste. "I've come to relieve the night watch." He didn't ask. He didn't offer it as a bargaining chip. He just stated it as a fact. He was here. "You don't have to do that," I said. Though a part of me, a deep, weary part, was profoundly relieved. "I know," he said. He walked over, picked up my water glass. "He'll get you a fresh one. The others here. They're around," I muttered. He nodded, a flicker of understanding in his eyes. He left and came back a moment later with cold water. He helped me sit up to drink it, his arm strong and steady under my shoulders. He didn't flinch. He didn't make a face. He just did what needed to be done. An hour later, I heard David and Sarah arrive. There was a hushed, furious conversation in the hallway. "Ben, what are you doing here?" David's voice, a sharp whisper. "I'm here for Grandpa. We have the night shift. It's covered. We've got a system. I've got it tonight. Ben, this is we've organized this. You can't just barge in and I'm not bargaining. I'm staying. You can go home." There was more arguing, but Ben's voice was calm, immovable. Finally, I heard the front door close. Silence descended upon the house for the first time in days. Ben came back in. He pulled a book out of his duffel bag and sat in the armchair the corner of my room. "You don't have to stay in here," I said. "It'll be fine." "I know," he said again, and opened his book. He stayed all night. He didn't do it 4 points. He didn't do it to be seen. He did it because I was sick and needed help. It was that simple. And in that quiet, watched over by my grandson, the one who refused to play the game, I finally knew what I had to do. The experiment was over. The results were in. The loyalty auction had a winner. And he was the only one who hadn't placed a bid. The silence Ben brought with him was a physical presence in the house, a cool, clean bomb after months of relentless, grating noise. That first night, I slept deeper than I had in years. It wasn't just the exhaustion from the illness, it was the profound relief of no longer being a spectator in my own grotesque circus. For a few precious hours, there was no performance to monitor, no ledger to update, no need to decipher the hidden motives behind every offered glass of water. I woke to the smell of coffee, not the scorched, bitter brew David made, announcing each step of the process with a clatter of pots, as if the mere act of operating a coffee maker was a Herculean feat of devotion. This was just coffee. The rich, dark aroma I remembered from mornings with Eleanor. I pushed myself up on my elbows. Weakness still clung to me, a heavy blanket, but my head was clearer. Sunlight streamed into the room. Ben was gone from the armchair, but his duffel bag was still there, a quiet promise of his return. I heard a faint, rhythmic sound from outside. Scrape, scrape, poor scrape. Curiosity, that old beast, got the better of me. I shuffled out of bed, wrapping my robe around myself, and made my way slowly to the window that overlooked the backyard. And there he was. Ben was in the garden, had found the old wheelbarrow and a shovel from the shed. He was carefully, methodically, undoing the damage. He wasn't just hacking at the torn up earth Cynthia's landscapers had left. He was digging out the remnants of the decorative gravel, piling it to one side. Had salvaged what was left of Eleanor's rose bushes, a few pathetic, root-bare stalks, and had them lying gently on a burlap sack, their roots kept moist. He was sweating in the morning sun, his t-shirt stuck to his back, his movements efficient and focused. He wasn't doing it for an audience. He was just fixing what was broken. I watched him for a long time, a strange tightness in my throat. He hadn't asked. He hadn't announced a grand plan to restore my estate. Had just seen a wrong and was setting it right. It was the most sincere thing anyone had done for me since Eleanor died. The front doorbell rang, shattering the morning peace. Then a key turned in the lock. Of course, they all had keys now, a necessity for their round-the-clock campaign of suffocating care. I heard Cynthia's voice, shrill and carrying. "Tony, we're here. We brought a frittata." I didn't answer. I just stayed at the window, watching Ben. They found me. Cynthia swept into the room, followed by Mark, holding a glass dish like a holy offering. "There you are. We were so worried when David called and said that boy had just inserted himself," Cynthia said, bustling over to plump pillows that didn't need plumping. "We came right over. Now, you must eat. You need your strength." "Ben's here," I said, my voice still raspy. "So we heard," Mark said, a hard edge to his voice. He came to stand beside me at the window. He looked out, and his face tightened into a mask of pure contempt. "What in God's name is he doing now? Making another mess? For Christ's sake, we just paid to have that area landscaped. Cynthia paid to have it dug up." I corrected him quietly. "Ben's cleaning it up." "Well, he should have asked first," Mark snapped. "This is exactly what I'm talking about, Dad. No foresight, no consultation, just impulsive, reckless behavior. He doesn't think about the consequences. He could throw out his back. And then who's liable? You are. Your homeowner's insurance would skyrocket." The sheer absurdity of it almost made me laugh. The boy was trying to rescue his dead grandmother's roses, and Mark was worried about insurance premiums. Ben chose that moment to come in through the back door, wiping his forehead with his arm. He stopped short when he saw the welcoming committee. "Aunt Cynthia, Uncle Mark," he nodded, his tone neutral. "Benjamin," Mark said, folding his arms. "Care to explain what you're doing out there?" Ben looked from Mark to me, a flicker of confusion on his face. "The roses. I thought maybe I could save a few. Replant them." "That's very kind," Cynthia said, her voice dripping with a condescension so thick you could spread it on toast. But really, darling, it's a job for professionals. We've already hired someone. You'll just make it worse. Ben's jaw tightened. He looked at me. Do you want me to stop, Grandpa? All eyes turned to me. Mark's, demanding I side with reason and fiscal responsibility. Cynthia's, demanding I validate her authority. Ben's, simply asking a question. No, I said. You finish what you started. The look of sheer outrage on Mark and Cynthia's faces was worth every penny of the fortune they thought they were protecting. Ben gave a slight nod and headed for the kitchen to get a drink of water. Dad, this is insanity. Mark hissed the moment Ben was out of earshot, letting him dig around like a common laborer. It's beneath him. It's beneath this family. I was a common laborer, Mark, I said. It's how I built all this. Or have you forgotten? He flushed. That's not what I meant. And you know it. I meant there's a time and a place. This is a time for convalescence, not for 4-yard work. It looks desperate. Ah, there it was. The core of it. It looked desperate. Ben's genuine, physical effort was a stark contrast to their purchased, perfumed gestures, and it exposed them. It made their loyalty look like what it was, a cheap, transparent transaction. The frittata's getting cold, Cynthia said. Her lips a thin, tight line. It was a retreat. She knew she'd lost this skirmish. They stayed for an hour, a tense, awkward hour where they tried to pretend everything was normal. They talked about people I didn't know, about parties I hadn't been invited to, about stocks I didn't care about. They were marking territory, reinforcing their presence. Ben stayed in the kitchen, giving us space, or more likely, avoiding them. When they finally left, with promises to check in later, the house sighed with relief again. Ben emerged. I can go, if you want, he said. I don't want to cause trouble. You're not the one causing trouble, I grunted. You hungry? I think there's a desperate frittata with our name on it. A real smile touched his lips for the first time. Yeah, okay. That was how it began. The others didn't surrender, of course. The loyalty auction entered its most frantic, desperate phase. Ben's presence was a wild card, an unforeseen variable in their carefully calculated equations. Their efforts redoubled, becoming more extravagant, more invasive, as they tried to outmuscle the simple, quiet fact of him just being there. David, upon hearing that Ben was doing manual labor, showed up the next day with a team of top-tier carpenters to refurbish my deck. The noise was unbelievable. The pounding of hammers, the shriek of saws, all while I was trying to rest. When I finally staggered outside and asked what the hell was going on, David beamed. Surprise, Tony. Tearing out the old rotten boards, adding a whole new section with a composite material, maintenance-free. You'll be able to entertain out here for years to come. The deck wasn't rotten. It was fine. I'd built it myself 40 years ago with wood that was still solid as a rock. I looked at the crew, their rate probably $100 an hour per man, and saw the ledger in David's eyes. See, this is real value. This is money spent. This is loyalty measured in square footage. Stop, I said, my voice barely a whisper over the din. What's that, Tony? David cupped his ear. I said stop. I roared, finding a reserve of strength from somewhere deep. The saws whined to a halt. The workers looked at me. Get off my property. All of you, now. David's face fell, then hardened with indignation. I'm trying to help. This is a $15,000 upgrade. For you. I don't want it, I said, my chest heaving. I like my deck. Now get them out of here. He left, sputtering with fury, the crew packing up their untouched tools, no doubt still charging him for the full day. The cost of doing business in the loyalty auction was getting high. Chloe's approach was subtler, but no less infuriating. She started a social media campaign. Team Grandpa. She'd post pictures of herself bringing me soup nourishing my favorite guy. Of the flowers she'd arranged brightening Grandpa's room. Of us playing chess, checkmate. Love these moments. The photos were always carefully staged, filters applied, her smile dazzling and utterly empty. She was curating the illusion of perfect, devoted grandauthorhood for an audience of hundreds, and I was just a prop in her show. The comment section was a festival of emojis, hearts, crying faces, praying hands. You're an angel, Chloe. Hayes, so lucky to have you. This is what family is all about. Shed, show me the comments. Beaming. See, Grandpa. Everyone thinks we're so cute. I wanted to throw her phone out the window. Through it all, Ben just was. He stayed in the guest room. He cooked simple, good meals. He made sure I took my pills. He didn't talk much, but his silence was a comfortable one, not the tense, expectant silence of the others. He found an old photo album in the attic. Pictures of me and Eleanor when we were young, of me building this very house, of Mark and Sarah as gap-toothed kids. He'd leave it open on the coffee table to a different page each day. It was his way of talking, of reminding me of who I was, before I became the prize in their game. He didn't ask for anything, not once, not even when the topic of the Italy program came up again. Sarah, in a fit of strategic genius, decided that the best way to compete with Ben's physical presence was to highlight his failures, specifically his lack of ambition. We're just so disappointed about Italy, she sighed one afternoon, while Ben was at the store. It was such an opportunity for Ben, but he just let it go, didn't even try to find a way. Some people have that fire, you know, that drive to better themselves. She looked at me meaningfully. I just stared back. She wanted me to see Ben's inaction as a character flaw, to contrast it with Chloe's relentless social climbing or Mark's corporate ambitions. She didn't understand that his refusal to play her game, to play any of our games, was the strongest character he'd seen in years. The fracture in the family widened into a chasm. The two camps, Mark, Cynthia, and Sarah, David, were now in open warfare, and Ben was the common enemy. They'd call me separately to complain about each other and to warn me about him. Dad, you have to be careful, Mark said on the phone, his voice low and serious. Ben's isolating you. It's a classic tactic. Hayes moving in, making himself indispensable, cutting you off from the rest of your family. Hayes probably going through your papers right now. Sarah was in tears last night, David reported gravely. She's worried sick. That boy is manipulating you, Tony. Hayes playing the long game, acting all humble, but Hayes the most ambitious one of the lot. Mark my words. Their paranoia was a sight to behold. They were projecting their own motives onto him with such intensity, they couldn't see the truth that was right in front of them. They were trapped in the maze he'd built, and they were gnawing their own legs off to get out. I felt a strange detachment from it all. The illness had left me weak in body, but sharp in mind. The fog had lifted, and I saw everything with a terrible, crystalline clarity. The game wasn't fun anymore. It was sad. It was pathetic. These were my children, my blood, and I had reduced them to this, scheming, backbiting caricatures of greed. I knew what I had to do. The plan he'd conceived in anger had reached its conclusion. The data was collected. The results were incontrovertible. I called my lawyer, Frank Abagnale, an old friend, tougher than a $2 steak and discreet as a vault. Tony, Head answered. You sound better. I am, Frank. I need you to come to the house, today, and bring a new will. The simple one we talked about. There was a pause on the other end. The nuclear option. You sure? I've never been more sure of anything in my life. Do you want me to bring witnesses? No, I said, my eyes drifting to the window, where Ben was now carefully replanting one of the salvaged rose bushes. I've got a witness. Frank arrived an hour later, his briefcase looking like it had been through a war, which, given his clientele, it probably had. He was a big man, with a bristling white mustache and eyes that missed nothing. Ben let him in. A Mr. Abagnale is here for you, Grandpa. Send him in, Ben, and you stay, too. Ben looked puzzled but nodded. Frank came into the living room, gave me a once-over, and grunted in approval. You look like hell, but better than you did. Thanks, Frank. This is my grandson, Ben. Frank shook Ben's hand, his gaze assessing. I've heard a lot about you, son. I doubted it was anything good. Ben just nodded politely. I got straight to the point. Frank, I want to revoke all previous wills and codicils. Every last one. I want a single, simple, ironclad last will and testament. Everything. The house, the business, the investments, the liquid assets. Everything I own, every last stick and stone, goes to Benjamin here. I gestured to Ben. Outright. No trusts, no conditions, no delays. He gets it all. The room was silent. Frank just nodded, popping open his briefcase and pulling out a document. Had already drafted it. He knew why he was coming. Ben, however, looked like he'd been struck by lightning. His face went pale. Grandpa, what? No, absolutely not. It's done, Ben, I said, my voice firm. I don't want it, he said. And his voice was sharp, almost angry. It was the most emotion he'd seen from him throughout this whole ordeal. That's not why I'm here. You can't do that. It's my money, my house, my decision, I said. And I damn well can. You'll destroy the family, he pleaded. Do you know what that will do to them? To my mom, to Uncle Mark. You can't just cut them out. It's cruel. I looked at him. This boy who, in the face of a life-changing fortune, was worried about the feelings of the people who had shown him nothing but scorn. His refusal wasn't a strategy. It was his character. It was who he was. They destroyed themselves, Ben, I said quietly. I just handed them the shovel. They've earned exactly what they're going to get. Nothing. Then give it to charity. He insisted, his hands clenching into fists at his sides. Give it to the dog shelter. Give it to anyone but me. I won't be the reason they hate each other forever. I won't be the reason he trailed off, shaking his head in disbelief. This is what this has all been about, isn't it? This whole stupid game. This test. Yes, I said simply. He looked at me, and for the first time, I saw not pity, but a deep, profound disappointment. It hit me harder than any anger could have. I don't want to win a game I never agreed to play, he said, his voice low and steady. He turned to Frank. I'm sorry you had to come out here. Then he turned and walked out of the room. A moment later, I heard the back door open and close. Frank and I sat in silence for a moment. Well, Frank said, taking a pair of reading glasses out of his pocket. He doesn't want it. I know, I said, a weary smile touching my lips. That's why Hayes getting it. Frank shrugged. Your money, your circus. He laid the document on the coffee table. It's all there, simple and clean. Leaves no room for ambiguity. They'll fight it, of course. They'll tie it up in probate 4 years. Let them try, I said. You'll handle it. Damn right I will. He handed me a pen. You sure? I didn't hesitate. I scrawled my name at the bottom of the page. Anthony Giovanni Luciano. It was done. Frank signed as a witness, and we got the housekeeper, Maria, who'd been hiding in the kitchen during the exchange, to sign as the second. She did it with wide, fearful eyes, knowing she'd just signed a document that would unleash hell. Frank left. I stayed in my chair, looking at the signed will on the table. It was just a few pieces of paper, but it felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds. It was my revenge, my final judgment. It was also, I knew, a terrible burden to place on Ben's shoulders. But he was strong. He was the only one who could carry it. Ben avoided me for the rest of the day. I didn't push it. I knew what I'd done. It forced him into the game, even in his refusal to play. It made him the winner, and in doing so, it made him the target. That evening, he came into the living room. His face was set, resigned. I'm leaving in the morning, he said. I can't be a part of this. I know, I said. They're your family, he said. A last, desperate attempt. You can still fix this. Talk to them. Tell them the game is over. Divide it fairly. Just end it. It's too late for that, Ben, I said. The will is signed. It's done. He just shook his head, a world of sadness in the gesture. Then I'm sorry. For all of it. He left the next morning before the sun was up. He didn't say goodbye. I heard his car start and drive away, the sound fading into the morning quiet. The house felt emptier than it ever had before. The silence he left behind wasn't peaceful anymore. It was lonely. The others, sensing a shift in the force, descended within hours. It was as if they'd smelled the ink on the new will. They came as a united front for the first time since the auction began. Mark, Cynthia, Sarah, David. Even Chloe was there. They crowded into my living room, their faces a mixture of concern and naked suspicion. "Where's Ben?" Mark demanded, dispensing with pleasantries. "Gone," I said. "Gone? What do you mean, gone?" Sarah asked, her voice trembling. "He left. He had enough of the circus." They exchanged glances. This was unexpected. Their common enemy had vanished. "Well, good," David said, a note of triumph in his voice. "It's for the best. Now things can get back to normal. We can take care of you properly, without his interference." "Yeah," Chloe said, already pulling out her phone. "Now we can get back to Teen Grandpa for real." They thought they'd won. They thought Ben's departure meant the field was clear. Their relief was palpable. The performance began again, more intense than ever. They were like runners sprinting the final lap after the top competitor had pulled up lame. But I was done watching. The show was over. The curtain had come down, and they were still on stage, bowing to an empty house. I endured it for a few more days. Their cloying attentions, their whispered conferences in the hall, their transparent attempts to find out if he'd changed my will, if I'd seen the light about Ben. I gave them nothing. My strength was returning. The pneumonia had left me thinner, weaker, but my resolve was iron. I had one last act to perform. I called another family meeting. They arrived, buzzing with anticipation. Ben was gone. The will, they assumed, was still the old, complicated one that pitted them against each other. The loyalty auction was back on, and they were the only bidders left. They took their usual places. I didn't stand. I remained in my armchair, the signed will sitting in a plain manila folder on my lap. "You all look like you're waiting for a verdict," I said, my voice flat. "We're just concerned about you, Dad," Mark said smoothly. "You've been through a lot." "I have," I agreed. "I've been through a lifetime. I've built things. I've loved. I've lost. And I've watched." I let my gaze travel over each of them. My God, how I've watched. The mood in the room shifted. The fake concern began to crack, revealing the unease beneath. I started a game. I continued. A little experiment. I called it the loyalty auction. I wanted to see what you would do, how high you would jump. And you didn't just jump. You performed acrobatics. You spent thousands. You neglected your lives. You turned on each other, all for the promise of what was in here. I tapped the folder. They were frozen, staring at the folder as if it were a live grenade. "You thought you were competing for shares," I said, "for percentages. You thought love and care were currencies you could spend in exchange for a bigger piece of the pie. You were wrong." I opened the folder and took out the will. I didn't read it. I just held it up. "This is my last will and testament. It was signed and witnessed 3 days ago. It revokes all others. It is very, very simple." You could feel the hunger in the room, a physical force. They were leaning forward, their eyes glued to the paper. "It leaves everything," I said, my voice dropping to a near whisper. "Every single thing I own to Ben." The silence was absolute. For a full 5 seconds, nothing happened. They were processing, the words crashing into their reality, breaking it into a million pieces. Then the room exploded. "What?" Mark roared, shooting to his feet. "You can't be serious." Cynthia shrieked. "Dad, no." Sarah wailed. "He manipulated you. He brainwashed you." David was sputtering, his face purple with rage. That's well, fight this. You're not of sound mind. You were ill. We have witnesses. Well, take this to court and have it overturned in a week." Chloe just stared, her mouth hanging open, the hashtag dreams evaporating before her eyes. I let them rage. I let them scream and cry and threaten. I sat in my chair, the will in my hand, and I watched the final, glorious unraveling of my legacy. When their initial outburst had spent itself, leaving them panting and red-faced, I spoke again, my voice calm amidst their storm. "Ben didn't want it," I said. "He begged me not to do it. He said it was cruel. He said it would destroy the family." He was right, but the family was already destroyed. You destroyed it the moment you started seeing me as a bank account and not a person. You did this. Mark screamed, pointing a trembling finger at me. "You poisoned this. You set us against each other." I set the stage, I corrected him coldly. You wrote the play. You performed it. And you were magnificent. Truly. The groveling, the jealousy, the sheer, insincere competitive spirit, it was a spectacle to behold. I looked at their horrified, furious faces, and I felt nothing. No triumph, no guilt, just a vast, empty stillness. Get out, I said softly. They didn't move. They were stunned, paralyzed by their rage and greed. Get out of my house, I repeated, my voice hardening. All of you. The show is over. The audience has gone home. One by one, they left. Mark, shaking with fury. Cynthia, sobbing with theatrical despair. Sarah, supported by a seething David. Chloe, looking lost and confused, her phone forgotten in her hand. The front door closed behind them for the last time. I sat in the silence for a long while. Then I picked up the phone and called a number I knew by heart. It rang twice before he answered. Grandpa. Ben's voice was cautious. They know, I said. There was a long sigh on the other end of the line. I'm sorry. Don't be, I said. It was always going to end this way. I paused. The house is quiet now. Yeah, he said. I bet it is. We stayed on the phone in silence for a moment, to people connected by a terrible, weighty secret. What are you going to do now? He asked. I looked around the living room, at the walls that held a lifetime of memories, most of them good. I thought of Eleanor. I thought of the rose bushes Ben had replanted. I'm going to sit in the quiet, I said. And in going to wait. The silence they left behind wasn't empty. It was filled with the ghost of their outrage. I could still feel the vibration of their slammed car doors, the echo of David's sputtered threats hanging in the air like poison gas. I sat in my armchair for a long time, the manila folder feeling like a lead weight on my lap. I had done it. I had pulled the pin on the grenade and rolled it into the center of my family. The explosion was everything I had imagined, and yet the aftermath was hollow. There was no victory dance in me, no sense of righteous triumph, just a deep, profound fatigue and the cold, certain knowledge that the war was not over. It had just entered a new, more vicious phase. Frank had warned me. They'll fight it. And fight they did. The first shot across the bow came not from a lawyer, but from Chloe. It was digital, of course. The Team Grandpa hashtag, once a monument to her performative care, transformed overnight. The carefully curated photos of soup and chess were replaced by a single, lengthy post. It was a masterpiece of manipulative vagary. It's with a heavy heart I have to share that our family is going through a deeply challenging time. It began, accompanied by a photo of her, Mark, Cynthia, Sarah, and David, all looking somber and united. An elderly family member is being manipulated and taken advantage of in his most vulnerable state. It's a nightmare scenario we all hope never happens to our loved ones. We are heartbroken, but we are resolved to fight for what's right, to protect him from those who seek to isolate and exploit. Please keep us in your thoughts. Protect your elders' family first. The comments were a flood of support and outrage. You're an angel. This is so common. It's disgusting. Who is it? Name and shame. Sending love and strength to you all. She had tried and convicted Ben in the court of public opinion without ever mentioning his name. She had painted herself as the heroic defender, and me as a doddering fool being led to the slaughter. I saw it because Maria, my housekeeper, her hands shaking with anger, showed me on her phone. This is lies, Mr. Tony, she said, her accent thickening with emotion. Vile lies. I know, Maria, I said, patting her hand. But thank you. The legal documents arrived next, served by a grim-faced process server at my door. A formal challenge to the will, filed in probate court. The petition was a work of fiction that would make a novelist blush. It alleged undue influence by Benjamin Michael Rossi. It claimed I was not of sound mind and disposing memory due to my recent illness and advanced age. It cited my irrational and unnatural disposition of assets as proof of my incapacity. It was signed by all of them, Mark, Cynthia, Sarah, David, even Chloe, though I doubted she'd read a word of it. They had lawyered up, some fancy firm from the city, with a name that sounded like a sneeze. Higginbottom, Smither, and Gable. Frank just chuckled when I read him the name over the phone. Higginbottom. Oh, they're throwing the big guns at us, Tony. They bill by the hour and the tear. Don't worry. They're all polish, no grit. Well, grind them down. The machine was in motion. Discovery requests started flooding Frank's office. They demanded my medical records for the last decade. They demanded depositions from Maria, from my doctors, from anyone who had seen me in the last 6 months. They were going to try and prove was a senile old man who'd been hoodwinked by his cunning grandson. Ben called me. Had been served, too. His voice was strained, full of a weary dread I had put there. Grandpa, I can't afford a lawyer for something like this. I don't even want to fight them. Maybe we should just settle. Give them what they want. I'll sign whatever. No, I said, the steel back in my voice. You will not. You will not reward them for this. You will let Frank handle it. This is my fight, Ben. I started it. He'll finish it. It's my name they're dragging through the mud. He shot back, a rare flash of anger. They're making me out to be some kind of monster. My friends are seeing this stuff. My mom, she won't even take my calls. That one stung. Sarah, my little girl. She had signed the papers. She was part of the mob coming for him. I'm sorry, Ben, I said. And I truly was. But giving in now won't stop them. It will just teach them that this is how they get what they want. We see it through. He was quiet for a long time. I hate this, he finally whispered, and hung up. The siege intensified. Since they were now officially claiming I was incompetent, they started showing up unannounced, performing wellness checks for a future court date. Cynthia would come over and start taking pictures of the house. The place is looking so cluttered, Tony. It's a falling hazard. The court will need to see the state of things. She'd take close-ups of dust on a windowsill, a stack of unopened mail, a single glass left in the sink. Mark came by with a financial advisor from his office, a slick young man in a too-tight suit who tried to grill me about my investment portfolio. Just trying to get a sense of your overall grasp of your assets, Mr. Luciano, had said, condescension dripping from every pore. I looked him dead in the eye. Do you know what the sex rule 10b-5 is, son? He blinked. Broadly, yes. It's about insider trading. I cut him off. I testified in a case that set a precedent for its application in 1983. Now, get the hell out of my house before I call your compliance department and ask why one of their advisors is harassing an elderly client about his will. They left in a hurry. David's tactics were cruder. He started a campaign of petty vandalism. My newspaper would go missing. My garbage cans would be tipped over. One night, someone let the air out of my tires. I had no proof it was him, but the timing was impeccable. It was intimidation, plain and simple. A reminder that they were watching, that they could make my life difficult. Through it all, I refused to bend. Frank was a bulldog. He met every legal motion with a counter-motion, every request with a demand for proof. He deposed them. He made them sit in a room and answer questions under oath. He told me about it later, grinning around a cigar. You should have seen it, Tony. It was beautiful. Asked Mark to define undue influence. He couldn't. Ask Cynthia to list specific examples of your cognitive decline. She could only talk about the rose bushes. Ask David about the financial advice he'd been giving you. The guy squirmed like a worm on a hook. They've got nothing. It's all spite and speculation. The battle lines were drawn, and the family was utterly shattered. The fragile alliance between Mark's faction and Sarah's didn't last. The stress of the lawsuit, the mounting legal fees Higginbottom, Smither, and Gable didn't work cheap turned them on each other. They started arguing over who was paying for what, who was doing the most work, who had the best strategy. The loyalty auction was still running, but now the currency was legal effort, and the prize was the chance to win a larger share of nothing. Months bled into a year. The probate case dragged on, a slow, expensive grind. I was tired. The fight, which had initially been a source of dark satisfaction, had become a millstone around my neck. I was living in a fortress of my own making, wary of every phone call, every doorbell ring, and then, I had a heart attack. It was real this time. Not pneumonia. Not a play for sympathy. A real, sees you in the chest, lights going out cardiac event. I was in the workshop, sanding a piece of wood, for no reason other than to feel something solid and real in my hands. When the pain hit, it was like a giant fist closing around my ribs, squeezing the breath and the life out of me. I crashed to my knees, sending sawdust flying. I don't know how long I was there. Time became a blur of agony and struggle. My mind screamed for help, but my voice was gone. This was it. This was how it ended. Not with a courtroom verdict, but alone on a dusty floor, the smell of pine and regret in my nostrils. The back door opened. "Grandpa, you in here?" I was in the neighborhood and Ben. His voice cut through the fog of pain. "Head come back. Head just come back." He saw me. His face, usually so guarded, crumpled into pure, undiluted terror. "No, Grandpa." He was at my side in an instant, fumbling for his phone, his hands shaking so badly, he almost dropped it. He called 911, his voice cracking as he gave them the address. He stayed on the line, following the dispatcher's instructions, his hand on my wrist, his eyes locked on mine. "Stay with me. Look at me. Just stay with me. Okay. Breathe. Just breathe." He wasn't doing it for a will. He wasn't doing it for a ledger. He was doing it because I was his grandfather, and I was dying on the floor in front of him. The ambulance came. The EMT swarmed in. I was loaded onto a gurney. Ben climbed into the ambulance with me, never letting go of my hand. His face was pale, his jaw clenched tight, a single tear tracing a path through the workshop dust on his cheek. I survived. Again. They put a stent in. A miracle, the doctor said. Another 10 minutes, and we wouldn't be having this conversation. I woke up in the cardiac IQ. The beeping was back, the sterile smell, the weak, washed out feeling, and there, slumped in the chair next to my bed, asleep, was Ben. He looked exhausted, older. Head stayed. The news of my heart attack broke the dam. The family descended upon the hospital. But this time, it was different. The legal battle had drained them, financially and emotionally. The sight of me, frail and tethered to machines, took the fight out of them for a moment. They gathered around the bed, a silent, shamed circle. Mark, Cynthia, Sarah, David. Chloe lingered by the door. They looked at Ben, asleep in the chair, and for once, there was no accusation in their eyes, just a hollowed-out exhaustion. The silence was broken by Sarah. She looked at Ben, then at me, and a sob escaped her. A real one, not a performance. It was a raw, broken sound. "My boy," she whispered. I turned on my own boy. She looked at David, and for the first time, I saw something like defiance in her eyes. "What are we doing, David? Look at him. Look at Dad. What are we doing?" David opened his mouth to retort, to spout some legal strategy, but the words died in his throat. The setting was too real, too final for his bullshit. Mark spoke, his voice ragged. "The legal fees Higginbottom is bleeding us dry. For what? A chance to fight for a will that might never even he couldn't finish." The absurdity of it was finally dawning on them. They had spent a fortune fighting over a fortune they were never going to get, and in the process, they had almost missed their father's actual death. I looked at them, my children, broken by the monster I had created. The revenge I had craved was complete. It was a Pyrrhic victory. I had won, and the cost was everything. I gestured weakly for a pen and paper from the knit-stand. Mark, confused, handed them to me. My hand was shaky, the writing spidery and weak. "Call Frank. Tell him to drop the case." All of it. They read the note. Their faces a confusion of hope and disbelief. "Drop it," Mark asked, but the will. I shook my head. I took the paper back. "I'll make a new one. A fair one. Now leave. All of you. Just go." They left, shuffling out, a defeated army. Only Ben remained, stirring awake as the door closed. He saw I was awake and leaned forward, his face etched with concern. "Grandpa, you okay? What did they want?" I just shook my head and closed my eyes. The war was over. Recovery was slower this time. The heart attack had taken something out of me that the pneumonia hadn't. I was mortal, and I finally felt it in my bones. Ben moved back in, not because of a game, but because I needed help. He never mentioned the will, the lawsuits, any of it. He was just there. A month later, I was strong enough. I called Frank and I called the family. A truce had to be formalized. They came to the house, subdued and nervous. They sat in the same living room where it declared the loyalty auction. It felt like a lifetime ago. Frank was there, with a new document. "This," I said, my voice still weak, but clear, "is my last will and testament. The previous one is null and void. The lawsuit is over." Frank is drawing up the papers to dismiss it with prejudice. A collective sigh of relief went through the room. They looked like prisoners who'd just had their sentences commuted. "This will divide my estate into equal shares among my children, Mark and Sarah. There are trusts for the grandchildren, Chloe and Ben. The business will be sold, and the proceeds added to the estate." The house, I paused, looking around. "The house goes to Ben." There was a silence, but it wasn't hostile. It was accepting, numb. "Why?" The question came from Sarah, not with anger, but with genuine curiosity. "Because Hay's the only one who ever saw it as a home," I said. "Not an asset. He fixed the roses. He stayed when I was sick. He came back when I was dying. He doesn't want it. He never did. That's why he should have it." No one argued. The fight was gone from them. They signed the necessary papers to end their own lawsuit. They agreed to the terms. The loyalty auction was finally, officially closed. After they left, Ben came and sat with me. "You didn't have to do that," he said. "I know," I said. "But it was the right thing, the only thing left to do." The years that followed were quieter. The family never truly healed. The scars of that time were too deep. There were Christmases, birthdays, but the easy warmth was gone, replaced by a cautious, polite distance. They had looked into the abyss of their own greed, and they couldn't forget what they had seen. Mark and Sarah got their money, but they lost the unthinking certainty of their inheritance. It had been a fight, and it had left a bitter taste. David and Cynthia eventually divorced. The financial strain of the lawsuit had been the final nail on a long-rotten coffin. Chloe moved to another state, her social media now filled with pictures of a new life, a new hashtag, fresh start. And Ben, he lived in the house. He finished his degree. He met a nice girl, a no-nonsense veterinarian who didn't care about his money because she didn't know he had any. He told her about the workshop and the roses and his crazy grandfather. They got married in the backyard, under an arch covered in the blooms head saved. I gave her away. Her own family wasn't much to speak of. I held my first great-grandchild in that living room, a little girl with Ben's quiet eyes. I told her stories, not about business or money, but about her great-grandmother, and about building a house, and about the importance of knowing the weight of a good piece of wood. I died in my sleep last night. It was time. I was old and I was tired, and I had made my peace. I'm gone now. This isn't a story I'm telling you from a porch rocking chair. This is my last testament, the one not written in any lawyer's papers. They're all in the lawyer's office now, right at this moment. Frank is there, his mustache as white as ever, looking grimly satisfied. They're gathered around the table, waiting for him to read the will they all agreed 2 years ago. The fair one, the equal one. They'll hear the divisions of the trusts, the distributions of the assets. They'll nod, somber and respectful. They'll think they know how this story ends. But I had Frank add one last codicil, a single, simple clause, added after the last of them had signed the dismissal papers. A secret between me and him. The house, and everything in it, goes to Ben. That was public. That was known. But the money, the millions, the investments, the stocks, the liquid assets from the sold business, all of it, the fortune that started this whole damn thing, it doesn't go to Mark. It doesn't go to Sarah. It is bequeathed, in its entirety, to a single trust. A trust that will be administered by Benjamin Michael Rossi. The trust's purpose is singular, and the terms are unbreakable. The principal can never be touched. Only the interest can be distributed, once a year, on the anniversary of my death, and every year, on that day, Ben is to write a single check. The amount doesn't matter. It could be $1. It could be 100,000. It's up to him. The check is to be made out to the person he believes has shown the most genuine, selfless loyalty to their family in the past year. He can give it to his mother. He can give it to his uncle. He can give it to his cousin. He can give it to a stranger on the street. He can keep it himself, if he truly believes Hayes earned it. The choice is his, and his alone, every year, for the rest of his life. So, the game isn't over after all. I've just changed the rules. The loyalty auction is now a permanent fixture of this family. But this time, the bids are silent, and the judge is the only honest man among them. They wanted a competition. I've given them an eternity of them. Let them be loyal now.